Hey everybody, welcome to Drive Thru Review 230. Today I'm going to talk about Lewis and Clark, The Expedition. This is a game from Ludonauts Games. Plays 1 to 5 players, and I've actually played it 1, 2, 3, and 4 players. I haven't played it 5 yet. I'm sure it works fine. I'm going to go ahead and just tell you this is one of my contenders for Game of the Year. I am really enthralled with this game. Now basically what you're trying to do is do the same path and exploration from St. Louis to basically Portland that Lewis and Clark did. So you're trying to sort of race them, maybe beat them. And one thing I was sort of curious about was, well, weren't they the only ones that made that expedition and made that exploration and embarked on that trek? Well, no, there were some other folks that did it. One guy, Alexander Mackenzie, who you actually sort of play against in the solitaire game, actually did it 10 years before them. So it is a very interesting game. The mechanics are very interesting. The theme is very interesting. There's a lot of cool stuff going on. Let me just jump into how it works and how it plays, and then I'll come back and tell you more what I think about it. Okay, so here's how the game board might look at setup. And you can see over here, if we zoom in there, we've got some different scouts, these little meeple type of characters there. They are going to start here in St. Louis. And then you have their little camp markers also set there at St. Louis. Now the object of the game is to basically race up the river here into basically looks like the Rockies, and then over into the Cascades possibly, and then get here at Fort Clatsop. And the first person to plant their flag, basically set camp either in this space or a little bit further down the track, is going to be a winner. They're going to win immediately. So to do that, you're going to be playing cards and also doing a little bit of worker placement here with these Indian meeples here. And I say Indian because that is how the rule book refers to them. So let's talk about how you will play cards. Now everybody has a identical deck of cards. You might have different characters and different historical figures as names on these cards, but all of the different special abilities are going to be the same for everybody. Now there's a couple of things to know about the cards. The main part of the cards is this little left-hand banner here, and this tells you what the action that you can do with it is. The other part of the card that you can see here is this sort of badge here, and they're badges that match the different trade goods and resources there. So you're going to want to make note of that. And then also you have this number here. So this kind of shows you the power of the card if you're using this card to spend to activate another card. So very basically what you're going to do is you can maybe play this card, and then you can take another card, flip it over, and you can see here this one had a 2 on it there. So we've got basically 2 Indians or 2 power worth of stuff that we're going to power it up with. And this one had a 1, so we've got 1 power. So you're basically going to play this card in front of you, and this basically tells you the amount of times up to 3 that you can activate it. So basically we're going to sort of collect these equipment markers here. Those are in gray. Basically 1 time. I'll explain exactly how it works. Where if I had put this one here, I could do it 2 times and so on. Now you can also, if you play the card, I'll just put it here for now, also power it up with the workers here and then stick that in there. So the most you can power up a card is basically 3 times. And if you want, you don't have to even play a card. You could just use 3 of the Indian workers there, and then that would power it up in that way. So on your turn, you always have to do one thing. It's called a compulsory action. So you have to always at least play 1 card or place a worker out. Now you don't start with any workers. We'll talk about how to collect these in a second. But you either have to play a card or put one of these out, and it's basically simple worker placement. You're going to put them in a spot, and then you're either going to collect some goods and different things. I'll go over these spaces in a minute. So you have to do one of those 2 things, and then you have 2 optional things that you can do. The first optional thing is to buy a card from this row here. So you can buy one of these cards, and we can see how much they cost if we zoom in a little bit here. So we can see the cheapest one here is going to cost us 1 pelt, and then a different amount of the equipment. Again, these are the gray tokens there. So basically, the cost of the card is also going to be equal to the power that it provides in a sense. So all of the 3 cost ones are going to cost you, 3 equipment. And then the number of pelts here is going to go higher as we go along. So it's just similar to like Through the Ages or different games like that. You can see as they come out off the draw deck there, they're going to be expensive, but then as we kind of buy cards and cards get removed, they're going to get cheaper in regards to the amount of pelts you're going to buy. but the amount of equipment that you have to use is going to be fixed based on whatever card it is. So an optional thing is to be able to buy one of these cards. Now the second optional thing that you can do is actually to make camp. So if we look down here, everybody's got a player board here, and we're going to have different resources and goods on here. You're going to be able to put different Indians in the different boats like so. I'll explain more of that in a second. So whenever you make camp, as you play these cards down, so let's just put some cards down here. Let's say we play these different cards, and then now we're going to make camp. So when you make camp, you're going to take wherever you are up this river here, and then you're actually going to set your little camp marker. And then you may go backwards a little bit and move your scout backwards a couple of spaces or even a lot of spaces there. Now the way that you figure out how many spaces you go back is basically the number of cards you have left in your hand. You can see these little markers here. That's the number of spaces, so 1 space per card. And then as you fill this up here with goods and resources and Indians, you're also going to go back. So you can see here you've got 3 slots here, and you'll actually start off with a pelt and equipment and food, which is the pink one there. You'll start with there. But if you have any good in here, you're going to go back 1 spot. And then in this one here, it's sort of a bigger boat. You're going to go back 1 spot per good in this spot. You can see by that iconography there. And then you have a boat that you can have 1 Indian in, and then you have a boat that you can have as many Indians as you want in, but you're going to go back 1 spot on the river per Indian that you have in that slot there. So a lot of the game is going to be sort of managing how much stuff you collect, you know, what kind of cards that you play. You know, you don't really want an odd number of cards usually, because then you're, again, usually most of the times these will take 2 cards to play, but again, you can play them by just doing the Indian. So it's going to be a little bit of hand management in that regard, as well as resource management and worker management, and just so that you don't go back that many spaces. So let's talk about what all these basic cards do, what the different action spaces on the board do, and then I'll go over a few of these special cards that you're basically going to be buying and then adding into your hand. So first we have 4 basic sort of trade cards or collection cards, and you can get one of the basic resources, and the basic resources are up here. You've got hides, wood, food, and equipment. And then we've got more basically resources that are more complex in a sense. You've got canoes and horses there. So if you want to collect a resource, let's say we wanted to collect wood here. We could play that, and then maybe we'll put this other one underneath here, and we're going to power it up once. And then maybe if you wanted, you could add an Indian here, and you know, you could power it up twice if you want. Well, what you're going to do here is you can see it's telling you to look at this badge here. So this card actually already comes with a wood badge on that card there. But if you had played previously this card, let's say we had played this on a previous turn, now we've got 2 wood badges. And it's possible that other players, your neighbor players to be specific, may have wood badges up as well. So what you're going to do is look at all the wood badges that you have out, plus the players to your left and right, or in a 2-player game it would just be the both of you. You're going to count up the number of wood badges, multiply it by the number of workers here, and you're going to collect that much wood. So if none of my neighbors had any, I would have 2 wood badges, and I'd multiply that by 2, so I'd collect 4 wood resources. If each of my neighbors had a wood badge, we'd have 4 wood badges times 2, so I'd collect 8 resources. And all of these trade cards basically work like that. So you can collect, you know, the different goods here. This is the hide. You'll take a look at the hide badges, and then the food and the food badges, and then the equipment and equipment badges. So you're going to do that. Now remember, when people make camp, they're going to collect all their cards back into their hand. So you want to be cognizant of that if you're planning on collecting a lot of a resource, and you think, you know, Billy over there, well, he's going to be, you know, picking up his camp here pretty soon, and he's got, you know, like 2 or 3 of these wood badges out. I need to be wary of that, because I may not get, you know, the amount of wood that I was expecting if I didn't plan and time it right. Now the last 2 cards that you start with is your interpreter and your commander. And again, these are different pictures and different folks for every player, but they do the same thing. So the interpreter is how you're going to actually collect workers and then get them onto your convoy of boats here. So when you play this card, you're going to need to power it up, and then you're going to look at the board here and collect Indians. Now it should be noted that there was a fair amount of cooperation between Lewis and Clark and the Indians that they met along the way here, and they actually had help from a gal named Sacagawea who acted as a guide for them. So that is very historical in nature. Now the game board is going to start with a certain amount of Indians over here, and based on the number of players there'll be a certain number in the stock, and then you'll take one of those before you start the game and put it in this spot here. Now when you play your interpreter, you're basically going to collect all the Indians that have been placed out here, put them in this center powwow space here, and then you'll be able to take as many as you want out of that central spot. So to start the game, whoever plays this card first basically is going to get 1 Indian, and they can take that and then put it back on their player board. Now the other thing that happens when you play this card here is as you collect these and then take these, then a new one's going to come here from the supply into this spot. So the next time somebody takes an Indian, let's say I placed an Indian out here as a worker, then we're going to take that one out, we'll put these 2 here, they'll be able to take as many of those as they want, they take them in their hand, and so the Indians are going to kind of sort of cycle in as the game progresses there. Now the other thing that happens that I always tend to forget, I'm getting better at it, is when you play your interpreter card, not only are you going to gather the Indians and then collect them, but you can see here you're going to remove the last card from the supply here, and these are going to slide down. So while we're talking about our friendly Indians here, let's talk about all the different spots here on the board. Now up here in the left hand corner we've got your basic things. You can go here, you can collect a hide and a food, you can go to this spot here and collect an equipment and a wood. Here you can collect 2 hide or 2 wood. And you can notice you can only have 1 worker in here at a time. So it's, you know, real traditional worker placement. A guy's placed there, it's now blocked until this gets removed off of the board. Down here in the lower right, we've got some more interesting spots here. The first spot here, you can see you've got some exit out cards here, as well as this thing here. So when you place a worker here, you can discard or basically remove or trash from your hand 0 to 3 cards, and then you're going to reset this entire row and then deal out 5 new cards there. So that's a good way to kind of flush the market, if you will, and try to find something more interesting for yourself. Last thing here is if we go here and you pay 3 wood, there's actually 2 spots that'll do that, and then you can grab one of these 2 tiles here. And this is an interesting thing. So if you grab this one, then you will get Indian out of the stock if there are any. If there aren't any here, then you don't get anything, but you get this, and you can add this to your convoy. Just kind of stick it on the end or wherever you want. And this is a free spot, so it's another little free boat. It's not going to cost you any time, but if you want, you can flip this over and you can have 3 spots. But if you have any Indians on here, it's going to cost you time. So it gives you a little bit more room, but there's a little bit more risk of kind of losing time here. The other option for this spot is to grab this piece here. When you take this, you can grab any of the 4 basic resources up there, and then you can put them on your boat, and this gives you 2 spots. But if you want to flip it over, you can get a little bit more room. You still get your free resources, but if you have any resources on here, it's going to cost you your time. So when you make the choice, you just put it on there and then it's set and locked in, and it gives your convoy a little bit more flexibility. Finally, over here in the middle is an interesting spot. So if you put your worker here and you pay a food, then you can copy any face up card on the board that anybody has played. So if my buddy had played this or I had played this, I can copy its effect. Now when you do that, you only do it with a power of 1. So if we'd had, let's say we'd had this card up here and then we'd powered this up with 2, even though you're copying this, you're still only going to copy it with the effectiveness of basically doing it 1 time. Finally, over here we have 2 spots, and this is where you're going to get your canoes and horses, and these are really going to help you travel, which I'll talk about in just a second. So here you can pay 2 wood and you get a canoe, and then here you can pay 3 different resources and you can get a horse. Now the thing to keep in mind now when we start talking about travel is most of the time at the beginning here you're going to be going across the river, then you're going to hit mountains, a little bit of river, a little bit of mountains, and then finally home. If we zoom in a little bit here, you can see on the front and back of the Rockies there, you have a spot that can be either or. It's mountains or water, and then mountains or water down here. And you're going to need different types of cards and different types of resources to be able to traverse the different types of terrain there. So let's talk about travel. So everybody starts with their basic commander here, and when you activate this card, and again, remember, you can activate it 1 to 3 times. So if I activate it once, I can do one of these actions. If I activate it 3, I can do any 3 of these. I could do 2 of these and 1 of these or whatever. So this one basically tells you if you pay a food, you can move up 2 spots on the river. If you pay a canoe, you can move up 4 spots, a little bit more efficient. And if you pay a horse, you can move up 2 spots in the mountains there. So I could do, maybe if I was getting close to the mountains, I could do a canoe and then 2 horses. Now when you move up the river here, there's one thing to note, is that if you end your spot on another player, you're just going to skip ahead to the spot in front. and that's something you'll have to kind of consider, you know, in your planning, and especially as you sort of hit this middle area here, when you've got to sort of, you know, change gears and not be so worried about water travel and focus on land travel, at least for a little bit, and then go back to water. And so you want to kind of think about, as players bunch up, if they do bunch up, you know, what's going to happen there. Now there are a whole mess of other cards. I believe there's 54 unique cards that you can buy over here on the market. So let me just talk about a couple of these. One thing that I haven't mentioned is that if you remember, this is the number of power that the card will imbue, and then it's also going to see equal the number of equipment that you have to buy. But you can also, if you want, burn or discard or trash a card for an equipment when you buy these. So you can do that one time on a purchase. So you can see this guy costs 2 equipment and 3 hides. If I only had, let's say, 1 equipment marker, I could burn this one out of my deck, count that as 1 equipment, and only pay 1 equipment, and then buy that card. Sort of like swapping out a card, getting rid of sort of a basic card and maybe getting a little bit better of a card. So you can see this one only trades in wood, but this one up there, if you can see that, you can trade in either of those, and it'll give you a 3 power when you use it, because remember, it's got the 3 on there as an indicator of the number of power as well as the number of equipment that it'll generate when you want to buy. So let's take a look at some of these cards here, and then I'll wrap up. Now I should say that the back of the rule book comes with an explanation of all of these different cards, and you definitely will be referring to this as you learn the game. The iconography is actually really straightforward, but you know, definitely there's a lot of different cards that are happening, so it's very easy to look up and, you know, figure out what they do. So let's just take a look at some of these randomly. This one, for example, you can move 3 spaces for 1 food, a little bit of an upgrade of your basic commander card. This one, instead of buying a horse out here on the board for 3 different resources, you can now play this, and then you can buy a horse for you know, 1 equipment. So that's a little bit more efficient. You can buy a horse for 3 pelts. This one you can spend an Indian, you basically put it back there in the center powwow space there, and you can pay any resource you want and then move 2 mountain spaces. And then let's see, this one is 2 equipment for a horse. This one is you can spend a canoe and a food for 6 spaces, which is basically the same as the other one, but you can do it as 1 fell action. So you remember, you could power these up and do that like 2 or 3 times there. 3 pelts to move up 2 mountain spaces. This one you can swap out canoes for horses and vice versa. You can trade in 2 Indians for a horse. This one you can do a wood and a food for 2 canoes as opposed to 2 wood for 1 canoe out there on the board. There's a whole mess of these. So some really interesting ones here. Let's take a look here. Let me find a good one there. So this one you can do a whole mess of stuff. This one here is interesting. You can put an Indian on the board, and then you figure out what resource you have the most of, and then for each pair of those you'll be able to move up. On the river, this one you can convert 1 canoe into 2 canoes. This is a neat one here, so it actually reduces the amount of hides that you have to pay for the cards there on the row there. So while he's out there, it's going to make those cards cheaper. There's a whole mess of stuff here. So this one is cool. You can pay 2 equipment, and then you're going to look at all the badges. Remember the badges we use for the trading here. So we're going to look at the equipment badges there, and you can move up that many spaces. So that's kind of an interesting dynamic there. So there's a whole bunch of stuff. 2 to move up. A lot of these are movement here. This one is very interesting. So you can actually activate a spot on the village out there. Remember, you could do this up to 3 times. And this is Sacagawea here. She was helpful to Lewis and Clark. So that's kind of a cool thing. So there's a lot of different cards you can do. You know, like this one's based on the number of face-up cards you have. So for each face-up card, you can get 1 of these different resources out there. So these are going to be a lot of an interesting sort of replayability that's going to happen. You know, because it's going to be a whole new set of cards every game. Remember, you can burn cards if you want, or just reset the row there, and you can burn cards out of your deck again to pay for the cards. So as you play the game several times, there's going to be different strategies that you can take on, and you can try to maybe specialize in different approaches with the kind of resources you get. Because you saw a lot of these are like, you know, use the pelts for stuff, or use the equipment for stuff that normally you don't use equipment for. Maybe you normally use wood for. And so you can kind of start to see that and what other players are doing, and then be real considerate about the types of badges that you play out front. Because when you go to trade and things like that, or do the collecting of the resources here, you don't want to just be handing them a bunch of pelts if they've got a strategy that uses a lot of pelts. So that's something you have to consider. And that's pretty much how you play the game. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the overview I'm absolutely in love with this game right now. I think it's just very sound from a mechanical perspective as well as a thematic perspective. I mean, just look at the art on the different cards here. So, you've got this nice painting and this guy here, and the art is just outstanding, and I love how the production quality of the graphic design, everything, it really draws you in. And you had plenty of a look at the board there, which is really cool. I like how there's different spots on the board. You can just pile all your resources in the different appropriate spaces. Like I said, I played it 1, 2, 3, and 4. I haven't played it with 5. It would probably go a little bit long, but I kind of do want to play it with 5. Especially as you play with people that have played the game at least once or twice, because it is a little bit difficult to figure out the timing of that, because you'd be playing cards and putting Indians out there, and then you got to pick up camp, and you're like, oh no, all the Indians that I put to activate my cards are coming back to me, and or I have too many resources. I got so many resources I was going to use in 2 turns, but I've got to pick up camp because I've played everything, and so I've got to make camp and go backwards. I mean, a lot of times, I think most of the times, even experienced players even might want to do this, is at the very start of the game, you just go backwards. You start in St. Louis, and you get kind of going, you get some resources going, get some workers going, and maybe get a canoe or 2, but you used your travel card to pay for something else, so you just go backwards. So you start out your trip going back to Europe, so to speak. That's what we were joking. I'm like, well, he's on his way back to France or England or wherever the heck he came from. But then you kind of restart, and then you can then start moving forward and get your engine going. And I like it. It kind of feels like I don't know why this reminds me of this, but it reminds me of those old movies, Cannonball Run, where the guys are trying to race across the country, and then they're having these sort of little side adventures and things like that are happening, to slow them down or move them further in the race. And the whole collecting of the resource thing really is an interesting part of the game. And now it's been described to me earlier before I played this game that it was kind of like Race for the Galaxy with a board. And I totally think there's a lot of similarities there, because you have the different cards that are multi-purpose. I mean, you can use them to pay for other cards, you can burn them out of your hand to buy other cards, you can do a whole lot of different things. You've also got this worker placement part, so you can play cards to gather your workers and spend your workers. But the thing about Race for the Galaxy is, other than kind of comboing up your cards, it has that role selection where you take sort of like explore and then settle and all the different things, and so you're trying to time your role selections with what the other players are doing. In this, with the collecting of resources and the whole picking up of camp, is you're trying to watch all the badges and then time all that aspect of it and try to time it so that you get in first at the very end. So the whole timing of it is similar. I mean, it's not a role selection thing. It's not some thing where you're like, oh, I have to ship goods for no reason. But it still has that same timing aspect to it without the role selection, without the shipping stuff. So that's very cool. So a lot of that sort of learning sort of the intricacies and the way you can combine cards, and they're going to come out so much differently. Now in Race, you have sort of a draw deck where you just draw blindly out the top. In this one, you can sort of pick and choose and be a little bit more, I don't want to say strategic, because that would be kind of selling Race short a little bit. But it's a little bit more, there's a little bit more planning in the strategy, instead of, kind of hedging your bets or, gauging probabilities. This is like, okay, I see this card that's working well with pelts or equipment, and I can kind of gear off and sort of focus on that tactic. I mean, there's been games where maybe I bought 1 canoe with the 2 wood, but the rest of the canoes came out of my little combos and stuff. So there's a lot of stuff you can do to play with that. And I really like the theme. I was a little kind of worried because the theme was Lewis and Clark. I'm like, and like I said at the beginning, there's only one Lewis and Clark. Nobody else made the trip. Well, sure, there was other people making the trip. There was Andrew Mackenzie that made it there before them. So it's cool. I mean, you're kind of all trying to compete and sort of be the first one to, maybe try to beat Lewis and Clark, or maybe you get there right after them or whatever. So it's got that aspect to it as well. I don't know. I really like it. And the whole resource management thing is very interesting because, you remember you've got the amount of goods and Indians and stuff you can store in your boat. So not only are you timing your card plays and your actions with everybody else for the collecting of resources, but you're also trying to make sure that you spend everything by the time it comes to collect camp. But other times there's, you don't necessarily want to do that. You don't have to get too hung up on moving backwards. You can sort of, build up and get your engine and try to pick and choose good cards that are going to work well together, and then kind of take it a little bit in the shorts on the front end. And then now you've got your engine. Now you're going to start speeding up and try to make really big long strikes. And then as you move up the river, you're going to hit the mountains, and then go back to the river and hit the mountains. Now, one thing I didn't mention, I forgot to mention it, is it gives you these tokens here. So you can see you've got a blue on that side, and then you probably can't see that well, a little mountain on that side. So you got a little handful of these tokens there, and you can set those out on the board and kind of change up the route. So maybe, I don't know if there's enough tokens to do this, but you probably could do like all mountains at the end. So you didn't have to switch up. Maybe it would make it a little bit simpler to, just do river, 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 and then mountains. And that may even be a good way to learn the game, because I've seen where people get really hung up because they're like, ooh, canoes, and they just sail up the river, and they're like, oh, I didn't buy any cards to sort of help me be a little bit more adaptable in my strategy. But I really like that they threw those tokens in, because as people learn the game, then it's going to be kind of samey. I would expect. I mean, every game gets samey after a certain number of plays. But you can throw that in to change up the routes. Maybe throw in a bunch of mountains at the beginning. Just totally ahistorical, anti-reality. But you could do it just for fun. So there's a lot of cool stuff in the game. I said I played the solitaire game. Sorry for just trying to be long-winded here, but trying to squeeze it in. I played the solitaire game. That's actually really cool. Basically, it's one guy you're competing with, and he just moves up one space every turn. Every time you take a turn, he moves up one space, one space, one space. And that was really cool because, like I said, I was way behind him. I think I hadn't even barely left St. Louis, and he was hitting the Rockies already. And I actually caught up and won on the very last turn of the game. And then I just blew right by him. So that's actually a pretty cool thing. And there's an interesting thing it does with the badges on the player board, or on the main board. I'm not going to explain it, but it's really simple. So that's neat as well. And it definitely plays fun with 2 and 3 and 4. I don't know that I really have a favorite player count. I kind of like the 3 and 4 because there's more of the considerations with the badges and the collecting resources that has to happen there. You can kind of play off a little bit more. There's a little bit more dynamic there. Now, before I get too crazy with just a heaping praise on, there's one sort of small thing that I don't think is actually a problem, but I think you could see it as a problem maybe on a first play. And the thing is like when you go around the table, you can kind of tell who's going to win in those last 2 rounds. Because based on how the cards are, picked up and set down and everything like that, you can see that, oh, okay, when somebody kind of picks up that camp, you go, they're going to win in a turn or 2 here, because now they're a short distance away. I've still got to go through a cycle of playing a card and picking up my stuff to be able to reach it. So the last turn or 2 can be a little anticlimactic, but to me it's not a huge deal. I don't usually like that, but it's kind of like, we know you won. And it's just, I think because the game plays out where it's an instant race and you're over, it feels a little bit more obvious in this game than it probably does in other games. I think in other games you can kind of fool yourself, unless there's hidden information. But even a game like Kalis, you can see who's going to win. After you play that a few times, you can see who's going to win the game. Or it's going to be one of these 2 people. But I think as people get experience, that's going to be less of an issue for sure. I definitely have seen that. But I can see people being like, well, this is dumb. Why even play the last 2 rounds and stuff like that? So I don't think it's a problem, but it's there. And if that really is something that would bother you in a game, then I would say, take a second look at this. But other than that, I don't really think there's anything that I could cite as a fault, for sure. Everything else really works really well. I like how the cards are going to come out and be different every time. Different combos to play with. Can't say enough. Board, artwork, components. This is good. This is very, very good. Now, for my friends in the USA, this is a little bit difficult to come by. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe there's going to be a Kickstarter to bring this over. I believe it's going to be a very small print run. I think it should be soon. I don't know. I kind of heard, through the grapevine. So if you want to get this, you can import it from Europe. I believe there's a few copies still out there in circulation. But if you wait for that Kickstarter, and it may not come, I think it's coming. I don't know. I thought they were going to have it earlier than now. But you can get it then. And I bet you if they are going to be one that's going to be a limited print run, I would just totally get this. Definitely a very fun game. Plays great at all player counts except 5. I don't know. Probably 5 is fine. Probably goes longer. The box does say 30 minutes per player. Yeah, I bet it goes faster. Let's see, we played yesterday. I played a 3-player game yesterday, and the 2 other players were new. And we were done with rules in about an hour and a half. And take the rules out next time, we're done in just over an hour. Plus, it takes a couple of rounds to get going. So this, I think, will go faster. To go faster than 30 minutes per player. It just it depends on the players at the table. But this one definitely has the possibility of going quicker. Okay, so done talking. It's awesome. Go buy it. Get it. Holy cow, what a good game. Lewis and Clark, thanks.